Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Yana Johnson, and joining us today from the Australian Army is Warrant Officer Trent Morris. On the 15th of September 1999, 20 years ago today, the United Nations Security Council issued Resolution 1264, calling for a multinational force to restore peace and security to East Timor. International Force East Timor, better known as INTERFET, was organised and led by Australia and commanded by Major General Peter Cosgrove. East Timor was colonised by Portugal in the 16th century and was known as Portuguese Timor until 1975, when the Revolutionary Front for an Independent East Timor declared independence. 9 days later, it was invaded and occupied by the Indonesian military, and the following year it was declared as Indonesia's 27th province. The occupation of East Timor was followed by decades of conflict between separatist groups and the Indonesian military. After almost a quarter of a century, a new Indonesian government allowed the East Timorese to vote on their future. The United Nations mission on East Timor, to which Australia contributed military liaison officers and the Australian Federal Police, was established to conduct the vote. Held at the end of August 1999, it resulted in overwhelming support for independence. When the result was announced on the 4th of September, pro-Indonesian militias launched a campaign of violence, looting, and arson. Many East Timorese were killed, and as many as 500,000 were displaced from their homes, about half leaving the territory, in some cases under threat of violence. With the violence remaining uncontrolled, Indonesia agreed to the deployment of a multinational peacekeeping force. INTERFET forces began deploying to East Timor on the 20th of September 1999, with representatives from 22 countries and including 5,500 Australians. 5 months later, on the 28th of February 2000, command was handed over to the United Nations Transitional Administration in East Timor. Involvement in East Timor was Australia's largest peacekeeping mission to date, and the largest overseas military deployment since the Vietnam War, as well as being the first time Australia had led a major international coalition. Australians continue to be proud of our instrumental role in the establishment of the Democratic Republic of Timor-Leste. We are honoured to acknowledge Rear Admiral Daisuke Kajimoto, Japan Training Squadron, and the accompanying delegation. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool reflection by visitors and students on behalf of the following schools from Queensland: Marymount Primary School, Burleigh Heads, and St Catherine's Primary School, Wishart. Australia's Federation Guard is the tri-service ceremonial unit in the Australian Defence Force. They provide a ceremonial presence at civil and military events and during visits to Australia by foreign dignitaries. The Guard will now dismount the catapult party from the tomb of the unknown Australian soldier. If you are able, please stand and join in singing the national anthem.
Catapult party, attention! Catapult party, present up! Australians, oh, let us rejoice, for we are young and free. We've golden soil and wealth for toil, our home is girt by sea. Our land abounds in nature's gifts, of beauty rich and rare. In history's page let every stage advance Australia fair. In joyful strains then let us sing, advance Australia fair. Catapult party, shoulder up. Catapult party, order up.
Students, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was a vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which he remained true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we'll read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and operations for more than a century. But first we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Private Leslie Albert Allen. Leslie Allen was born at Sisters Creek, Tasmania on the 24th of September 1918, the eldest son of Albert and Ruby Allen. Known as Barney, he grew up in Myalla, a small rural community in the northwest of Tasmania, and served briefly with the 22nd Light Horse. Allen enlisted on the 28th of June 1940 at Launceston and was allotted to the newly formed 2nd 40th Battalion, the only battalion in the Australian Imperial Force recruited entirely from Tasmania. The 2nd 40th assembled at Brighton Camp in July 1940, where it spent the rest of the year training. In December, Allen was granted Christmas leave and used the opportunity to marry his sweetheart, Leah Polk, at Myalla. Leah would later give birth to a son, Barry Allen. In early January 1941, Leslie Allen joined the battalion at Bongilla Camp near Wodonga on the Victoria-New South Wales border. In February, the battalion was earmarked for deployment to Dutch West Timor to protect the airfields in the event of a Japanese attack. However, it was the thought that the deployment might provoke Japanese action, the battalion was initially held back in the Northern Territory. Once Japan made its intentions obvious with attacks throughout the Asia-Pacific region in early December 1941, the 2nd 40th was rushed to Timor. It departed Darwin on the 10th of December, arriving at Koh Pang 2 days later. The 2nd 40th formed the bulk of Sparrow Force, which defended the airfield at Penfu, the operational base for the Hudson Bombers of the 2nd Squadron, the Royal Australian Air Force. Sparrow Force was ill-equipped and likely to be overwhelmed by enemy attack. Its commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel William Lagarde, made repeated requests for the greater reinforcement of artillery and supplies, which were never met. Japanese air attacks on Timor began in late January and increased in intensity over the next month. Our No. 2 Squadron withdrew to Australia on the 19th of February, and the Japanese attacks began the next morning, with an amphibious landing south of Koh Pang and a parachute landing to the east. Faced with strong advance from the south and paratroopers on the only road running inland, Sparrow Force destroyed the airfield and began to move inland. During the following days, the small force battled its way along the road, overcoming several Japanese positions. By the morning of the 23rd of February, however, the odds against Sparrow Force were mounting. Food, water and ammunition were running out. Casualties were mounting and the large Japanese force was closing on its rear. After the Japanese delivered an ultimatum to surrender or be bombed, the bulk of the 2nd 40th Battalion, including Private Leslie Allen, became prisoners of war. The prisoners spent the first 7 months of the captivity interned in a camp at Asapa Pasar. Lax security allowed the men to slip out of the camps to forage and gather intelligence. A small party of senior officers was shipped to Java in late July, and the rest of the prisoners followed in September. From Java, the prisoners were dispersed throughout Japan's conquered territory. They would spend the rest of the war in camps in Java, Burma, Thailand, Japan, Singapore and Sumatra. While horrific experiences of the Burma-Thailand Railway and Sandakan are well known, the most dangerous period for a prisoner of war came during transportation. Those transported across the sea suffered from overcrowding, sickness and disease. While some journeys were short, the longest voyage lasted 70 days. To the prisoners of war, the transport ships of which they had been herded became known as hell ships. Over 1,000 prisoners might be crammed into spaces suitable for a few hundred. Prisoners were given little food and water, and there was a lack of adequate sanitation facilities. Another threat was posed by Allied submarines. On the 3rd of June 1944, a large convoy consisting of 19 vessels, including the Tamahaku Maru, left Singapore. Arriving at Manila just over a week later, the Tamahaku Maru loaded 7,500 tonnes of copper ore before leaving for Takeo. During its journey, it encountered a typhoon and no prisoners were allowed to eat or use the outboard toilet until they made it into Takeo. After loading more cargo, the Tamahaku Maru left for Moji. 4 days later, on the 24th of June 1944, with the lights of Japan in sight, the Tamahaku Maru was torpedoed by an American submarine. The ship was almost torn apart. Hundreds of prisoners jumped into the sea as it started to sink. Some were later picked up by a Japanese whale chaser, but over 550 died. Among the dead was Leslie Allen, who was 25 years old. Today he's commemorated on the Singapore Memorial, which bears the name of more than 24,000 Commonwealth soldiers who died in Malaya and Indonesia and have no known grave. His name is listed on the roll of honour to my left, among almost 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. A photograph of his name listed on the Singapore Memorial is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private Leslie Allen, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Catapult party, shoulder, arms.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and the sound of the last post.
They shall not grow old as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Catapult party, present, arms. Catapult party, shoulder, arms.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget.
Catapult party, in words, turn. Catapult party, quick, march.
We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they'll be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. We thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial and we wish you all a very good evening.